But 14 years ago, they had just, if you wanted to do something, you really had to work for it. And you had to go through all these different dungeons with different people, and everybody had to be geared right, and you needed people that played the right class, and they knew how to play their class. If you want to discuss that afterwards, we can discuss playing your class. So you have all these things that you need to do. And so this talk has been on my mind. I talk about compliance all the time, but I did not want to give the same thing over and over again. And then I was thinking, oh my gosh, I'm like I'm paying for something to be compliant. I mean, really, what's the difference? I mean, the main difference at the end is I get like a virtual firing molten core hound or something. So maybe if like CIS or compliance people could give me some sort of virtual toy, I'd be happier. But at the end of the day, we have to go through these steps. And how many people in here are consider themselves full-on compliance people? And how many people now are being asked to do compliance stuff? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's what we're going to have to do, and just like everything else, we need to do it at scale, and we need to do it with automation. It's rinse and repeat. You kind of go to these conferences, and if you've been to other DevOps days or whatnot, you kind of hear the same thing, and it's true. Today, we're just going to be talking about how this is going to specifically apply to the software in your life. I think the people and the processes struggles are the same no matter what. Always remembering that the people you work with are especially difficult. So I'm going to go over about how we're going to have a strategy for looking at compliance. So compliance for infrastructure, and obviously when it comes to people, process, and tooling, the tooling I'll be talking about is Chef tooling. But if you're already somebody who has something else, just delete it and use Chef. So did you know Chef is really good at uninstalling Ansible? So the first thing we want to do is kind of give you an overview of the world of Chef, because I'm going to be saying the word Chef a lot and maybe referring to different things. And if you're totally new, here we go. So there is Chef, the language, the domain-specific language, the thing you code in, right? So infrastructure is code. It comes along with InSpec now, and InSpec was really what we're going to be talking about today. So Chef is infrastructure as code, and like all code, if I wanted to act a certain way, that's what it does because I'm a developer. But much like a developer, I have to test it because guess what? Of course, that isn't true, right? So I have to make sure that what I'm doing is thinking I'm doing. I'm testing an environment. So InSpec is a testing language. It's a testing framework to test infrastructure, not to test Chef, to test infrastructure, which in turn is set by Chef, or it's set by Ansible, or it's set by you sitting here manually. InSpec and Chef are both open source projects that are taken care of by Chef, the company. So as you might imagine, Chef and InSpec are quite tied together as far as our point of view. But from a InSpec point of view, it's about testing your infrastructure. Whether you resolve it, it could care less. It's all about telling you how it's behaving. And then when you switch it to the point of view of a Chef developer, it's about how your cookbooks are behaving because you're managing your server with cookbooks, not by hand, right? So those are the two major languages. I should say languages, but anyway. Those are the things you code in, right? Then there's Chef Server. So Chef Server is what's going to take the Chef language, and you can do it at scale. Ever heard of Chef Zero? Yeah, you can run things solo on a box. But if you want, traditionally, if you want things at scale, you let Chef Server take care of it. Physical, VM, cloud, don't care. It's an OS. We're happy. And then we're talking about Chef Automate. So Chef Automate is the dashboarding and reporting. And also specifically for compliance, it gives you some capabilities at scale that you don't have with the open source. So we're going to talk about that because that's basically how we have solved it. And then finally, there is a Chef Workstation, not quite yet artist formerly known as DK. They're kind of parallel. But Chef Workstation is kind of the next generation DK, as everything you're used to if you're a Chef person. stays the same. Basically, it's your local development environment. The new version actually has some push capabilities. So the need to have a one-off is a real need. And so Workstation looks at that. It's actually agentless. I know, crazy. So that was an overview of Chef. Again, kind of a high-level overview of Chef, the configuration management. We have 3 levels. We have cookbooks that hold on to recipes, that hold on to resources. And those resources should be called ingredients. It's a sin that they're not, but nobody cares about that anymore. They're resources. But I really do think of them as ingredients in my head. And that's how you build things out. So, you know, at this point, who here is in the middle of deciding if they should do Puppet, Ansible, Chef, something like that? Okay. Oh, yeah. Uh-huh. Just pick one. Just do it at this point. And I think that's, you know, the difference between, wow, Windows users 2 or 3 years ago and now is just way different. I think now there's just an understanding if you have to choose. So people have chosen, and that's fine. And so the key to know for today is that what we are talking about works with all configuration management solutions. It could work with you manually rectifying problems, but that's not really going to be at scale because we're about at scale, right? But if you're using Chef, and what I'll be talking about today to kind of give you some reference, when we talk about how Chocolaty fits into this, you can manage your packages in Chef using Chocolaty. So we have a Chocolaty resource. Actually, what you start off with is a Chocolaty Cookbook that Chocolaty maintains that installs Chocolaty on the system, and then after that, as you will see, we can install whatever package we want. You can give it a version. You can not give it a version if you're a terrible person, and it'll just pick the latest. You know, it's flexible. You also have native resources for Powershell, for Dsc, security policy. Before Dsc came out, we have some kind of native for good old registry keys. Is everybody here kind of familiar with Dsc? Okay, and there's someone in the back of the room who's, I wouldn't even try to talk about that with you in the room, but it's a good thing. And if you're not using it, consider it. And it's a good thing to use with Chef too, because it has all that stuff already there. Wrap it, get it implemented with Chef. All right, so our first step is going to be understand and document the process that we want to end up with. And there's people, process, and technology. So this, in my opinion, is kind of split in 2. You have to start making requirements part of your everyday discussion. So whether or not your company has formally made DevOps teams and you have a compliance person or you have a liaison or whatever, it needs to just be normal. You need to figure out who that person is that you can build a relationship and start building that relationship with it. Because as you all said, you all raise your hands and you have responsibility. When the production goes down, compliance doesn't get called or yelled at or whatever. It's probably a friend in Nashville who happens to use Chef. We were talking and got called in the middle of the night because something was out of compliance, and an executive called an executive called an executive. Guess who gets called? The admin. So we want to push it to the left. We want to start as early as possible. Talk, get people part of your process. When you're planning, when you're upgrading, when you're deciding anything, you should be thinking about compliance too. And then there is the technology that's going to help you understand and document, and that is InSpec, right? Well, in this case. There really isn't at this point, well, I would never say there isn't because I don't know everything, but basically InSpec is fairly unique in its capabilities. You could surely, well, probably most documentation is SharePoint, Google Doc, et cetera, et cetera. InSpec just takes it to the next level as code, which is, the goal of many of us, to put as much in code as we possibly can. So let's get into a little bit more about looking into InSpec. Okay. And all right, so if you are completely unfamiliar with InSpec, and/or you're unfamiliar with Chef, and/or you're an Ansible or a Puppet, what I would say about using both InSpec and Chef, but we'll just focus on InSpec, is that it's pretty easy to start and get using. So I at all do not consider myself a Windows admin. I've surely learned more. I'll age myself. I tested NT when it came out to my college for the summer. But I'm not a Windows person in that I would not be able to do what you all do. But I can configure things with Chef, and I can test them with InSpec because they're human readable, because I understand if I'm looking for a Windows feature, this is how I would test it, right? So it's not something where you need to understand in-depth Ruby. It's something where you just kind of need to understand the general structure of any kind of coding or scripting. PowerShell's perfect entry into here. I think PowerShell, in my opinion, much more complicated and intense, or maybe not more complicated. There's a ton you can do with PowerShell. There's a ton you can do with Ruby, right? So in any case, everything is listed here. And if you are not already aware, there is a DevSec community, and it's out on GitHub. They have their own website as well. I believe it's probably might be told true, but two gentlemen, Dominic and Christoph, who created InSpec when they were living and working in a Germany telecom, and they were tired of fighting with their compliance people. They needed a way to communicate and fix things. And I go home and play World of Warcraft, and they wrote an entire program and then sold it to Chef. So they actually do this in their free time too. They just love it. Everybody has their own relaxation release, right? They're a part of it. Many active people are a part of this community. And so what you'll find is if you come to DevSec, you're going to see Ansible, Chef, Puppet. Why? Because InSpec could care less. So we have the hardening, we have the overall fixes for the different languages of their baseline profile, which is a small but important one. And then you can also look at, oh, here we go. I think I already brought it up. Burp, I didn't. Let's watch me search. Oh, here we go. Windows baseline. So completely agnostic. This, if you wanted to just take this, use InSpec, scan a server tonight, you can, right? InSpec is free, profile is free. If you have the SSH, InSpec works on a WinRM or SSH. So if you have the credentials, you can scan, and that's what it does. It scans. It finds out information, it reports it back, it does nothing more. And in each one of these files, just like everything, you design this how you want. So they just chose to put them in different files. Kind of look and see, all right. So here's a baseline control, looking for everybody's best friend, Internet Explorer, registry keys. Are those registry keys there? Are they the right thing? Blah, blah, blah. My experience with trying to enforce compliance issues is that it's 90% registry keys, 10% security policy, and I guess that equals 100%. But for an overall Chef point of view, there's a lot you need to do. Security policy and registry key take care of a lot. So you'll see that a lot, but hey, it's pretty easy to read, pretty easy to set. This is something that, and we'll see here in a second, this is something that I think you could, maybe I wouldn't say my mom, but you could get somebody who works in IT, maybe somebody in compliance who does not consider themselves super technical, but they have that CIS document, they have that PCI document, and it says the registry key should be set or the settings should be set. You can kind of explain that to them if they wanted to get that nitty-gritty. Now, they may not want to, and they won't have to, and we'll show you that in a second. But it's something that, basically everybody can understand and pretty easy to write. And as with all open source, there's a whole bunch of it already here as examples. So you just, cut and paste and figure out what you need to do. So that is the concept of InSpec. So when we are having those conversations and they're coming down from above and this is what you need, depending on your situation, if it's a huge thing they're asking for, like everything, if you can, make it iterative, figure out the most important ones, blah, blah, blah. But when you start documenting it, you don't want to document it in SharePoint, you want to document it in code. And just like code, actually not so much here, but really this title and description, they are, they're just basically comment friendly, right? So you can put whatever you want in there, notes, et cetera, et cetera. It's really up to you. Oh, that's one. So let me show you in my environment, and let's also together hope that this node didn't drop, because Amazon has really been enjoying my presence today. Let's see. Oh, this color is terrible. Hold on. Don't worry, I do this professionally for a career, so it's not a problem. Okay, well, wow. Okay, you know, I've never really liked the one that they chose for the demo. I always thought it was ugly, but now I think they probably chose it because it's ugly, but it works. Should have more respect for, oh my gosh. Okay, so we're not gonna do this for too much longer. So, I know it's something light. Okay, whatever, I officially give up. So basically it's complaint, so I think I'm in the wrong one anyway, so we'll go. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm actually here on a Windows desktop. I'm in my Chef DK, so I'm in my developer area, and I'm doing something called Kitchen List. So Kitchen is our testing tool, free with Chef DK. That's also free. So when you are writing your code and you want to be able to test it, you can use Kitchen, and Kitchen is stinking awesome. You can spin up Docker, you can spin up Vagrant, you can point to an AMI, so you are testing in very production-like scenarios. And what it'll do is it'll apply your cookbooks, or actually not cookbooks, cookbook. It is a unit test for your cookbook itself, and then it's going to apply those InSpec tests. So if we dive into here for a second. So this is a very exciting cookbook that doesn't do much. But what I have done here is I have all those tests that you just saw from DevSec. I just git cloned the repo and put it here. So that makes the tests a document and a part of your coding. Now there's also capabilities to actually put a link to the URL, other things, but if you really want to make sure that you're locking down the actual version that you're using, you can grab it here. So when I want to actually run this cookbook and I want to test it, and I'll point really quickly here to the configuration file, I can actually see what it's doing. It's pointing to a particular folder, it's running a specific thing, and that's when I'm going to run the InSpec. And let's see, we're doing on time. All right, so that's how you could run it in a testing environment. Command line, InSpec, exec, key, stuff like that. So that's how you do that, fairly straightforward. But really, what I want to focus on is the at scale, right? So you have the ability to do InSpec in the singular. Of course, you could become a scripting person and put it in a loop, but what we've come up for the enterprise solution for your sanity and everybody else's is Chef Automate and Compliance. And what compliance is it's just a whole bunch of InSpec with some nice views so that you have that central point of communication that you need for yourself and for everybody else to say, this is where we are. Not that having, when that person freaked out and called my friend, they probably still would have called her if they had this, but maybe she could have told her boss's boss to look at this and save an hour of her life. Who knows? We all need dashboards. We need visibility just for yourself. You're going to plow through all those logs. I mean, that stinks. So what you have here is the ability to, if you're familiar, oh man. If you're familiar with Chef Manage, that was an old administrative UI. This is sort of the next generation, so you can see Chef operationally. But really, what we're going to focus on is the compliance piece. So here we can see I have some nodes that I've already scanned. And you know, they're all a bunch of failures, and they're somewhat different, mostly because I've been playing with them and putting on different cookbooks, but it's going to be reality. But they're all scanning against the same profile. So 6 nodes, I can count, yay me, 1 profile. So you can look at it from a node perspective, you can look at it from a profiles perspective, and this is really the perspective that I think your overall compliance people are going to care about, right? I mean, they might care about the 2 nodes that are different, but from a percentage standpoint, from a coverage standpoint, this is what you can look at. So here within the DevSec, you can actually see that they are referring to some CIS standards as well. What comes specifically with compliance, which is pretty cool, and another reason to maybe care, is a full suite of CIS profiles that are supported by development that are in InSpec, which you can read. These are, aka, you can read them in the InSpec. So they have created a generator, basically, that takes this nightmare and gives you that. So now I have CIS profile coverage, and if I want to run a security policy test on my own, now I can just look here. That's personally how I learn, right? So it's all here. So full coverage. So what you have in the same way as a profile with DevSec, so I brought that profile into Automate. This guy actually lives here, so you would need Automate to actually do the CIS, but what you can do is day 1, put it in your configuration to your nodes and scan. And again, this is not Chef reliant. So if you have Chef, and it's, as you know, it's driven by the client, it's driven by the agent, you can make that part of it so that every time Chef runs, it's going to run the audit. But we also have the concept of scan jobs. So this is a guy. Oh, I had this yesterday and I freaked out. Let's see if I can do it. When did I run them? All right, well, boo for that. But you have the concept of basically setting it up to run scan jobs against specific servers. So what you could do is you could bring in, you basically node, a series of node based on name or whatever, your WinRM credentials, your SSH credentials, and you tell it to go. So again, if you want to have an understanding of where you are, all those older servers, so 2008, 2012, maybe you really aren't interested in managing them with anything. You're just trying to maybe migrate them over. It would be great to know where you are starting off. If you are interested in managing them, you just need to start. So no matter where you are, no matter how you're managing, compliance is going to be able to basically look at your fleet and go. We have a customer that is, always give the best examples, right? But we have a customer that is using InSpec, and they had to put in a PR request because they hit 1 million controls and there's no commas, and it's hard to read a number that big without commas. And granted, we have a lot of real problems. Nothing is perfect, right? But that was a pretty cool problem to have. So when you talk about, and they're a healthcare company, right? So they are not screwing around at all. But whether you're healthcare or no matter where you are, if you don't care about CIS, that's fine. Come up with your own standards. Much like you have multiple cookbooks and they build up, you can have multiple profiles and they build up. So you have base profiles and then project profiles and division profiles, however you want to look at it. Or if you're just your small team, do just your small team. Then we get into the automation and the fixing. So this is what I refer to as the chefy chef part. And let's see. Oh, I think I already have it open. All right, okay. So, not at all going to go into, so much for that. So not going to go into any more detail other than to say this is how we interact with Powershell and Dsc and Chocolaty. So here you can see I'm actually calling the cookbook that installs Chocolatey itself. And then I'm saying, Chocolatey, give me this specific version of Google Chrome and go. And then other things, right? Examples, Powershell, security policy, DSCs, full-on execute. So if you have things that already are working in PowerShell, use them. If you know DSC, use it, right? Grow. You don't, what's cool is you can, especially with the out of the box, but with anything, you can scan pretty quickly, but you don't have to fix everything at once. You can at least get going, right? So Chef is how we choose to fix it. The Windows resources for us, Windows is a first-class citizen. It was a big surprise to me that the Microsoft community, when I came to Chef, I was like, oh, it's all Linux. And they're like, the first thing they did, they were like, oh, we have a huge partnership with Azure, get going. And I was like, oh. So it's for real, and it's really where, from a community perspective and just from a kind of like a company perspective, it's really where our growth is and what we're excited for. So you have used InSpec as a technical tool to get where you are, talking to people. Again, you have that UI that's going to allow you to have that place to look. The Automate UI is completely safe. You can't do anything. With Manage, you could do some stuff. You can't do anything in Automate. So give it to whoever you want. We don't charge anybody. Everybody can log in whom you want, right? It's not total free for all. But you want this to kind of be your point. You want, ultimately, the goal would be InSpec is your document of truth. It's in GitHub. It's versioned, or TFS or whatever. It's versioned. It is the document, and then this view is what you use to talk to people. There's also, different people have different goals where they say, I would really like my compliance team to be able to write the InSpec. And if they can, that's awesome. And if that seems also insane, that's as well as okay. You can do it as well. It's kind of figuring out who does what good at your company. So here is a best practice, and I think something you should really think about and do. And that is start with the first deploying development, start with compliance. So I start on one of the first slides, push it left. And this is how you're going to do it. And this is this is all people. I mean, yeah, you have the technology of InSpec. But if you go to probably your development, your app people, and say, okay, I want to compliance your environment. Development, rightfully, is supposed to be a safe place to try things. So the whole concept of locking it down is very likely going to get pushback. And this is not about locking down development. This is about scanning and understanding development. So hopefully you already have or are very much working towards a goal where development is developing in a production-like environment because you're using Chef or Ansible or Puppet or whatever and spinning up the environments or allowing them to spin up the environments. So they're just not, giving crazy wackadoo whatever they want. So you already have an environment that is production-like, but developers change things. That's the whole point of production. A scan is going to communicate a lot without making somebody go, oh, I changed this, blah, blah, blah. Or, you can change things and not even realize their impact, right? That's the whole point of a scan. Start scanning in development. Start understanding who's changing what and why. And figure out when you have problems early, right? We want to start testing early. We want to start everything early, which is good. These are all good things, but compliance needs to be right there as well. So you get your compliance. When the code goes in, so does a compliance scan. You don't have to enforce anything. I mean, those compliance scans can come back 1,000%, severity 5. It doesn't, it might matter to you, but it's not going to change anything. Again, InSpec has no capability to change anything. Somebody would actually need to go in it and fix it themselves. And then this is going to allow you to do what automation is really for, which is the human decisions. So automation is not going to fix everything because every application team or division or whatever is going to have exceptions and they're going to have valid reasons. And you together with the compliance team or whoever's going to decide it, you're going to be in charge of managing that. You need the time to take care of that 5, 10, 15, whatever %. So that's why it's important to start automating in as many environments as possible. So even if people don't realize what's going on, you will. And you can say, okay, developers, do whatever the heck you want in test. First level of, kind of QA, we're going to start, throwing stuff. But, in integration, and especially pre-prod, you fail, no deploy. So you're starting communicating early what's going on versus we're supposed to push tomorrow and you're not telling me. They should also have the ability to look at the scan if they want to. It's again, people is the biggest part, but you need to have a way to deal with it. And setting up the automation is going to give you the capacity to deal with all of the problems, basically, that are still going to come up. And you're going to use technology. Change management. My whole background is in change management. I'm not a big fan of opening up tickets for no reason, but I think this is a good way to manage it. Whatever you have, use it. Again, if you wanted to just put comments in InSpec, if I'm talking to a customer, that's what they were going to do. When they have exceptions, they were going to put the comment in the InSpec code, and that was going to be their document of truth, which is good, but not quite as queryable or as nice as something like, a GitHub PR where you can put a tag and things of that nature, right? But use what you have. Come up with a lightweight process. Don't want it to bog anybody down, but this way you can query. You can say you have an exception for 6 months, and then I'm going to query, and they're up, and we're going to look at it again. Things of that nature. So what you have to do is basically change everything about the people you work with. You have to, just kidding, you have to start working with people differently. You have to use some sort of technology to automate this stuff. You have no choice, that's why you're here. That's good, you're the smart people. So it's just figuring out why. The thing to really think about if you're new to Chef at all, this is just the best thing ever. Learn.chef.io. It's not perfect. I heard somebody talking before that there was something broken. That probably wouldn't surprise me because it's humans. But this is basically paid for quality training for free. And it's modules that build. If you're just interested in InSpec and Chef as languages and you don't want anything to do with Automate, great. Go and learn that. If you want to play around with Automate, you can. It's a great place to just figure stuff out. And then, after that, you can kind of use it as a way to start talking to people. And look, there's marketplace images on both AWS and Azure. I believe at Ignite last week or 2 weeks ago, they announced that there is actually a managed version on Azure, which is to say you don't have to do anything with Chef Serve and Chef Automate. Because, who wants to manage any of this stuff? We have to deal with all the exceptions from those app people. You're going to be busy. In any case, I think that's it. Are there any questions? Yeah.
Faction race class.
I'm sorry?
Faction race class.
Faction race class. Oh, yeah, so my original was a female dwarf paladin, and I didn't realize that was weird. I was the only one on Agrimar for a very long time, which was kind of popular. I've never been popular before. And she's still around. I enjoyed playing Holy, but yeah. So I've been playing a Destruction Warlock for a while. She was human, now she's a gnome, because gnomes are awesome. I really don't like the new human faces at all. Good question.
Yeah. What are some of the interesting things you've seen people do with InSpec outside of direct compliance?
Where's Nathan Harvey when you need him? That's a good question. I guess my answer is honestly, for me, I'm pretty boring, and I'm usually talking to people who haven't used it at all. So I actually haven't. Do you have any examples or thoughts about that? Or?
Yeah, but it's one of those tools that every time I look at it, I keep trying to find other places to go and use it because it's so easy to kind of bolt on.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing, right? So underneath is Ruby. And based, I think, went on RSpec or server spec or server spec and RSpec. But yeah, there's probably people at the table who know way more, but great question. I have no good answer. Yay.
Fun InSpec fact.
So fun InSpec fact, InSpec drives the Azure policy feature for verifying policy on Linux machines in Azure. So it's the underlying engine there.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. So this was very focused on kind of VMs. InSpec now has capabilities to look at Azure, to look at AWS, to look at GCP, because that's stuff you might be managing as well.
I was going to comment a little bit on the things that are non-compliance related.
Oh yeah, great.
Like, the first one really is like what you're doing in Test Kitchen, right? If you're testing your infrastructure, whether you're building that infrastructure out with Puppet or Chef or Salt or whatever, you're using InSpec for basically the integration tests on that. So when you go build a Tomcat server or WordPress site or whatever, like you want to ensure that that site loads, that you get the correct content back. You're writing that all in an InSpec test, not in a full compliance control, like nothing to do with PCI or CS or whatever, but all those same resources apply, which is the cool part. So you can kind of learn it for integration testing and testing of your infrastructure and get it also in compliance, all in the same language. The second thing that kind of also goes to that reuse of the same language is that there's people who are using it with Sensu, so that you're writing Sensu checks that are really just basically InSpec resources, because you have all these resources that come with it. Think of those as like kind of like Nagios plugins. And now you can use, again, that same language that you already know from two other places, you can use in a third place and kind of have your integration testing and your monitoring become effectively the exact same resource you write, which is a pretty cool little feature to save some time.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming. And yeah, have a good day, rest of the day.